For all angiosperms, conducting tissue is different depending on whether the plant is herbaceous, does not form wood, or if is a tree. Xylem cells conduct water and nutrients up and plant food is transported down through the phloem. The location of this conducting tissue is different. In woody stems, xylem and phloem are located just inside the tree bark. If we girdle the tree by removing a strip of tissue all the way around, the tree will die. In addition, if we inject herbicide into this layer, it will have the same effect. For herbaceous stems, we need to apply our systemic herbicide either to the leaves or to the root zone. Herbicides can be selective in nature or non-selective. Selective control suppresses one species or certain types of plants, monocot or dicot, for example. An example is the herbicide 2,4-D, which controls broadleaf weeds but not grasses. Non-selective herbicides affect all plants and will kill green tissue it comes in contact with. Glyphosate is a good example of an herbicide which is not selective and systemic. We can make our herbicides selective by the way we apply them. We can vary the application rate. Some plants are more sensitive to low concentrations of pesticides than others. We can place herbicide in the root zone of some species but not others. Timing our applications after planting will kill weeds before our desirable plants emerge. Some plants will quickly detoxify herbicides but not others. Plants absorb and translocate pesticides at different rates. Slower absorption or translocation of a pesticide will allow the pesticide to be broken down and won't be as effective. Plants, and the same is true for insects, can become resistant to pesticides over time. Resistance will be discussed later in this presentation. Younger and smaller plants are generally more susceptible to herbicide than older plants. When we place a pre-emergent pesticide or leave high concentrations of pesticide in the soil, the chemical may remain active over a long period of time. Sometimes it is necessary to conduct soil tests before replanting to make sure that pesticide residue won't cause plant damage. We can detoxify contaminated soil in some instances with activated charcoal, but in most situations we need to remove contaminated soil. The effectiveness of non-selective herbicides is dependent on soil condition. Soil type, soil moisture and soil microorganisms have a great effect on herbicide uptake. The types of vegetation on the site also affect herbicide effectiveness. As stated earlier, some plants are more resistant to the toxicity of herbicides than others. An extra precaution we must consider when using non-selective herbicides: we need to keep them away from root zones of desirable plants. In addition, we should not apply pre-emergent herbicides to frozen ground because when thawed, the water could move off-site. The same is true on slopes, the herbicide can move off-site. A low-pressure sprayer reduces drift and overspray. Some chemicals are corrosive and will react with the metal in your spray tank. Check the pesticide label to find out what type of equipment is needed. When controlling annual or biennial weeds, the best time to control them is when plants are small and certainly before they go to seed. If we spray after these two opportunities, we would be wasting our money. This chart demonstrates exactly how important the timing of our application is. Almost 100% of weed control can be achieved when the plant first emerges from the seed. Once the plant is mature, we have zero control and a new crop of weed seeds. There are actually 3 opportunities for us to control perennial weeds. During year 1 we can control perennial plants in the seedling stage and during the vegetative growth stage. In addition to this, we can apply herbicides in the fall when the leaves are still green and before the plant goes dormant. The plant will be storing food in the roots and the use of a translocated pesticide will kill the plant root. This chart shows how after year 1, our application in the vegetative stage and in the fall achieves almost 100% control. Certain structures on plant leaves limit the amount of chemical the plant can absorb. The outside layer of the leaf, or leaf cuticle, is made of a waxy substance designed to keep water in the plant. Leaf hairs prevent chemical from reaching this waxy surface. The cuticle of the leaf have structures called stomata which open and close depending on temperature, sunlight and relative humidity. The optimum time to apply chemical is when the stomata are open. An additional adaptation plants have is the ability to develop resistance to certain chemicals when the same chemical is applied frequently over a long period of time. We would start to notice this when we have to use higher and higher concentrations of a pesticide product to achieve a high level of control over time. This should be a warning to us that we need to consider using a different chemical or non-chemical approach to weed management. Herbicide resistance is a serious problem across the world. These statistics have been developed over time. 467 resistant plant types made up of 249 species. Weeds which infest 86 food crops have become resistant. Weeds are resistant to 157 different herbicides that work against 22 different plant growth processes. Similar to insecticides, this chart demonstrates how plants develop resistance. Essentially, when we apply pesticides to control weeds, we do not achieve 100 control. Some plants have natural resistance to our herbicides, and those will be the plants which survive and reproduce. The plants which germinate from these resistant individuals are resistant as well. Over time, plants that originally were susceptible have been known through DNA mutations over time to develop resistance. To avoid development of resistant weeds, we need to vary the products we might apply. This chart was developed by Mr. Gary Reese of the Nevada Division of Forestry in Elko, Nevada. As you can see, there are many control options available, and there are specific time periods when we should consider using an herbicide to maximize control. There is no easy index which lists the different herbicide weed and site combinations available for your situation. You will be required to do some research beforehand, and you should utilize your experience and local experts to develop a similar chart that can be used in your area. Once we apply a pesticide, we cannot recall it. Therefore, we need to be sure it stays in the target site and does its job before it breaks down over time. Some knowledge of the fate of herbicides will help us to plan a safe and effective chemical application. The environmental fate of a pesticide is simply defined as what happens to the chemical once it leaves the application device. We want to kill weeds, but at the same time we must protect the environment. For the most part, this means not contaminating water supplies or damaging desirable vegetation. We must be aware, especially in urban settings, that our activities may create a public concern. So we must operate safely and be as inconspicuous as possible. After a herbicide is applied, three things can happen to it. The first thing that can happen is a pesticide may remain in place and be active over time. It can be absorbed by the plant or be degraded by microorganisms, water or sunlight. It might also move off-site through the actions of wind or water. Whether a pesticide is mobile depends on the actions of wind and water, but also on the chemical properties. Pesticide persistence is necessary when we consider using pre-emergent pesticides. This is really a balancing act. We want the pesticide remain in place to be effective over time. However, if it remains in place too long, there is a chance it will move off-site and result in an unwanted environmental effect. As mentioned earlier, the chemical properties of the herbicide will also determine how long it remains active. Chemical half-life for a few pesticide active ingredients can be seen here. Half-life describes how many days it will take the pesticide to break down to half of its original concentration. 2,4-D, a commonly available broadleaf weed control chemical, will only be effective for a couple weeks with a half-life of 10 days. On the other hand, Bromacil, which is commonly used pre-emergent herbicide, can remain active in the soil for over 150 days. Here is a site where we want our herbicide to be persistent or remain active over a long period of time. Usually, an annual application of a pre-emergent pesticide to a railroad right-of-way will help maintain visibility over a long period of time. One of the most common pre-emergent products, atrazine, will break down over a long period of time. As you can see, the chemical molecule includes a nitrogen ring, which is a very stable chemical makeup and lasts a very long time. Over time, three elements act against the molecule to degrade it. Microbial action, sunlight and water will work at breaking down the product, resulting in a different molecule. However, the nitrogen ring stays intact. The longer the original atrazine molecule remains intact, the longer the chemical will control weeds. Chemical structure makes all the difference when looking at chemical longevity. Although these two chemicals are similar, picloram lasts about 3 times longer. Again, the picloram molecule includes the nitrogen ring, which makes it more stable. Dissipation or degradation of a pesticide over time is accomplished through 3 processes: microbial, microbes, hydrological, water, or photolysis, sunlight. Over time, the chemical will break down and become carbon dioxide, CO2, and water. Out of the 3 factors which break down chemical, sunlight, ultraviolet radiation, results in the most rapid breakdown. Herbicides we use in muddy water will last longer because of limited penetration of the sun's rays. If degradation is slow, and a pesticide remains in place over time, there is more opportunity to move off-site. The pesticide can move off-site through the action of water and in some cases wind-blown soil particles. Water can move pesticides through soil layers and can contaminate groundwater, especially if pesticide does not attach tightly to soil particles. Pesticide can volatilize or evaporate in warm weather, be suspended in air, and be deposited again, in some instances where we don't want them to go. Water used to irrigate this sports field moved a pesticide product off-site and onto the ball field. The grass was killed as a result of runoff. It turned out in this instance, the pesticide was not labeled to be used along the edge of the ball field and it caused this damage. It does not attach tightly to soil particles, was soluble, which made it highly mobile. Solubility is the ability of a pesticide to dissolve in water. Pesticides that are highly soluble can easily move by leaching or runoff. How well a pesticide molecule attaches itself to a soil particle depends on the type of soil and the chemical charge. Let's say we have a soil profile made up of clay or organic matter. A positively charged pesticide can attach tightly to a clay soil. On the other hand, a pesticide with a negative charge will attach tightly to the organic profile in the soil. The pesticide will not move from the site. This is pesticide adsorption. On the other hand, sandy soils have a neutral charge. Therefore there is little adhesion or adsorption of the pesticide to the soil. The pesticide moves easily through sandy soil, no adsorption, and could contaminate groundwater supplies. Herbicide absorption, on the other hand, is when one substance enters completely into another. The example that was cited involving the sports field is an example. The herbicide is dissolved in the irrigation water and resulted in death of the turf area. For all these reasons, when pesticide is dissolved in the water, not only could it move off-site but it could leach. All these factors, high sand content, a soluble chemical, little adsorption and long pesticide resistance in the soil will increase the likelihood that a pesticide will leach. Picloram has no real electrical charge and is more of a risk for leaching than diquat. Diquat has a strong positive charge and binds tightly to clay or organic matter. The last fate process is the movement of suspended pesticide particles in air. Pesticide volatility is a measurement, millimeters of mercury, of how likely a pesticide will turn to gas. Pesticide with higher vapor pressure are more apt to volatilize. Pesticide labels usually include precautions about applying these products in warm weather. 2,4-diester formulations volatilize readily in warm temperatures, above 85 degrees. On the other hand, there is little chance that glyphosate will volatilize, even in warm weather. This photograph is from an investigation I did while working for the California Department of Agriculture. The Department of Wildlife applied a 2,4-D herbicide product in Washoe Valley during a spell of warm weather. This tree was located on a residential property over a mile away and was damaged because the pesticide had volatilized and moved off-site. Here's another damaged tree. Note that not all trees have the same sensitivity to the chemical and that we can't predict where the pesticide will move and it will be deposited when the weather cools down. The newspaper article at the beginning of the presentation reported that the Department of Wildlife settled with the homeowners to replace the damaged trees. In conclusion, we manufacture pesticides to have a relatively short life. With the exception of pre-emergent herbicides, those products which have long residuals are no longer desirable and most are not registered any longer, like chlorinated pesticides. When used according to label directions, they will break down over time through microbial action, sunlight and chemical reactions with water.